Hi, good morning, Tom from California.
Hey, Giselle, how you doing?
Good. Okay, so help me keep track. Where are you calling from?
I'm in London. I flew in last night, and it's a lovely summer's afternoon here.
Oh my gosh, we're feeling the summer heat here. We're in the 90s, approaching the 100s, but your home
Oh,
looks so beautiful.
well, thank you. And you're in Los Angeles or whereabouts in?
No, so I am about an hour away from San Francisco, so Northern California.
Okay, oh, fantastic.
I've been meaning to go to London. It's been like a long overdue visit. So one of these days I will go. And as you know, so many great bands from Britain, from the UK came out of that decade of the 80s, and it was dubbed as the second British invasion. And I saw in your press release that you were titled the New Wave icon. How do you define New Wave?
Big question. I mean, first of all, those categories are thrust upon you, but we didn't realize when we were doing it in the early stages that there was going to be this big transfer of information across the Atlantic. But um, I guess there was a scene, and it was partly the kind of post-punk, whatever punk became in the UK was something different. And so they started calling that new wave. And I was very much a part of those kind of bands. And then after a couple of albums, I uh, started experimenting with synthesizers and making a kind of more electronic sound. And that was the thing that transferred well into the States, I think, for us. And so maybe we're a little bit ahead of the curve in that regard. And lots of other people were doing it for sure. But it became actually a sound, didn't it? That kind of synth pop thing. And a lot of those musicians are still around, and they had a big influence.
Yes,
So
they definitely did have a big influence because I was going to mention that, like, are you surprised or thrilled that many mainstream acts like The Weeknd, Miley Cyrus, and The Killers are going into that direction of synth pop?
yeah, well, I mean, I think it's inevitable because we all kind of refer to each other's work, don't we? And look back to our favorite historical periods. But see, maybe there was something for a moment there was a little golden age of special writing and recording that people find eternally attractive. And so they copy it.
Yeah. Right, if it's not sampling. And I read that it's been 6 years since you played in North America. I actually saw you support Boy George back in Reno.
Oh, yeah.
Really great show, and he's playing at the same venue at the Fox Theater in Oakland, I believe in August. But you're touring this month. You're celebrating Into the Gap, 40 years old now. How
Mm.
do you mentally and physically prepare for a tour?
Oh, my gosh. Well, I mean, there is a kind of physical thing, isn't there, where you have to start um, concentrating on getting fit and singing a bit more than normal and, doing the exercises and making sure that you're not just going to collapse on day two. Uh, but on the other hand, I think, one of the things you learn from doing this repeatedly is how to pace yourself. So the temptation to party every night has to be put aside, I think.
We're all like, okay, bedtime now.
Yeah, especially in one or two parties a week, maybe, but you can't do it every night.
Yeah, yeah. And I was like, bravo to you, because when I went to see you in Reno, so the night before, a friend and I, we went to see Journey and Def Leppard, and then
Uh-huh.
came home late. Then I had to wake up early in the morning because my family and I, we had to drive to Reno, which was like 3 hours away because my aunt was getting married. And then after the wedding, we went to the concert. So I was like physically drained out.
It happens. Well, you have a glimpse as to what it's like backstage, then, I guess.
So you're playing Totally Tubular Festival of many stellar acts, the Romantics, Modern English. I've interviewed those guys before. Men
Yeah.
Without Hats, Bow Wow Wow, the Flintstones, and you're not the only Tom. There's Tommy Two Tone, Thomas Dolby. I would have made a joke saying that all three of you Toms should form a super group, but apparently that almost happened with you and Thomas Dolby and the members of the Tom Tom Club.
That's right. There was talk of that. I don't know how you heard about that, but Thomas wanted the four of us to to form a band and play each other's songs, basically, as a kind of idea. And it would have been the Tom 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 Club. But unfortunately, it wasn't to happen. And I think it's unlikely now because, of course, Chris and Tina have bigger ideas to address because the success, the kind of re-emergence of the Talking Heads because of the film being re-released and stuff. I think they should really get back together and do a massive stadium tour, but I don't think David is that keen.
So I told Wally Palmer, the Romantics, this totally tubular is an 80s phrase. Did you ever use that as part of your lingo? And what's some 80s slang you wish would come back?
Ah. Well, I mean, I first heard that, I think, with Frank Zappa's daughter made a record with him called Valley Girl, where she used all those kind of phrases. And we had a good snigger about that at the time, the gag me with a spoon stuff, So, yeah, it's a funny thing. I think it was very local to the San Fernando Valley for a while. It didn't really translate across the ocean to the UK, but nevertheless, a sign of the times, I guess.
I'm from the Bay Area, so our slang, which apparently has traveled, is hella. So make sure you say hella.
Okay, will do.
Use it in a sentence. Um,
Excellent.
in the early 80s, you were signed to Arista Records, and I think also Eric Carmen, Alan Parsons, Air Supply, Patti Smith, Whitney Houston, and the Church were signed around that time. Did you have any encounters with your label mates?
I must have had to some extent, but not. We didn't kind of jump into bed creatively or anything like that. Later on, actually, when I was managed in New York by Gary Kurfürst, I ended up working with all his artists, like the Talking Heads and Debbie Harry, and yeah, we kind of felt that that was our natural stablemate um, environment.
So other
But
new wave artists.
but particularly the kind of art rock, the art school rockers from New York, we really kind
Mhm.
of fitted in well with.
When I listen to Thompson Twins Lies and even One Kind of World and your Babel song that was featured in the Coneheads, there are influences of like ethnic cultures. What's your love affair between you and other cultural styles in your music art?
Yeah, that's a weird thing, but I've always had this interest in looking outside what was immediately part of the scene that you're involved in. So, West African music is one big thing that influenced me, but particularly North Indian music. I think that comes from the Beatles because they had that thing going on as well, where they were using Indian instruments and Indian musicians. And I love the kind of flavor of mystery and outsiderishness that it gave to their work. It was no longer just a beat group. It was something much more cosmic than that.
I know that you're a fan of the Beatles, and I think also that's a way for other people to be introduced to other like cultures, music, and even Gary Newman, he did the same thing with his album Savage. It had more of a Middle Eastern influence.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's so much to learn from other cultures. And I don't go along with this idea that that you should never consider taking an idea from outside of your neighborhood, lest you be accused of cultural theft or something or appropriation. I think if you do it with genuine respect and love for what you're discovering, even if you do it as a kind of ingenue, as someone who doesn't really know what they're doing, then it's a process of learning and it's a genuine voyage of discovery. So why not? And I think actually more than that, it's one of the interesting things about human nature is where cultures kind of rub up against each other and create something that was never intended. It just happens as an interesting side effect.
I like that you added that note, not stealing other cultures or making it a culture appropriation because that has been an issue, especially within our society. But if you have an appreciation for culture, it shouldn't be an issue. If you have a genuine love and you just want to share it to the world.
I think if it's genuine and it's done with the deepest of respect, then it's a very, very good thing. If you're just using it to make money, of course, it's a terrible thing.
I heard when you re-listen to your past recordings, it's like reading a diary, like
Yeah.
making memories pop up. If You Were Here was featured in the movie 16 Candles, how was a 16-year-old Tom?
Well, yes, full of wonder, romance, and insecurity, which is what it's all about when you're that age. Absolutely wanting to fall deeply in love all the time, but feeling terrible about when it goes wrong or the
Mhm.
risk that it might go wrong. And, I've never seen that film, but I've seen the scene that the music is used in so many times because it's always being posted on the internet and things. Maybe I should get to see the movie one of these days.
Yes, like after this interview, make that a must tonight.
it's a it's a strange thing. Maybe after so long, I keep it at arm's length. But it's funny because I met a lot of the people involved with the movie, but never saw the thing itself.
Wow. You know what's you're not the only one that's late to the party. So my mom, she's a child of the 80s, loves your band, and she's never seen it. And so I bought the DVD and then
Ah,
we watched it. And it's funny that you mentioned because you said that in the UK, If You Were Here wasn't really like a big hit. Same
that's right.
thing happened with OMD and their song If You Leave, because that was featured in Pretty in Pink. So it took off in America, but not so much in the UK.
Right, right. Yeah, these strange things happen. I was just putting together a set list for a performance in another country, and what you have to do is look where the song's charted. Some things that are like a core part of your set might not have even been released in the country you're about to play in, so it won't be well known. And yet something that was a B-side but got played a lot on the radio in that country, suddenly you're obliged to play it because everyone's demanding that song.
Is that
And
a
it,
challenge to, like, cater to each region, like, creating a whole new, set list, or is that was that the fun process of it?
well, I kind of wander in and out of that problem, with a certain naivety. But of course, the managers and the promoters are really keen that you play the things that are well known, that satisfies an audience. And so a certain amount of research goes into that. However, I must say, I just played what used to be East Germany, in Leipzig, and I thought back in the 80s, it was illegal to listen to Western pop music in that city.
Mhm.
So they're not going to know our music at all. It turns out we got there, we started playing, everyone was just singing along to all the songs because it was a revolutionary act to secretly listen to Western radio. So everyone did it.
That's awesome, and I remember you saying about, the thing that's missing today in rock and roll is the call to social change and, you know, take action on a certain cause. I know everyone's gonna recite like the Bob Dylans, Bob Marley, U2, the Beatles as, one of like the founders to staple that. But do you think there are any contemporary artists that are, pushing that movement?
In different ways, yes. I mean, the one that springs to mind, for example, is Taylor Swift, who is doing a lot for the role of women in society, never mind the music business, now. And so I have a lot of respect for her. But interestingly, because rock and roll doesn't carry the ambition of social change so clearly as it used to do, it's lost its kind of a revolutionary spirit in a way. It's more about celebrity than it is about change. So we're in an era where I'm aware of the enormous celebrity and fame of some people, but have no idea about their songs, because I just can't keep up with it, right? And I think a lot of people in my age group agree with that. However, it's all too easy to kind of give up on new music as well. And I think it's important to keep abreast of things and listen to new stuff all the time.
Who
I'm lucky because some of my band members are young. So, they bring things to my attention, but they also make music themselves, which for me is like fascinating new ideas stuff. And so I kind of I live in a house of love in that respect. We're all sharing ideas, and I don't have to look far for new satisfactions.
what time do you usually wake up?
Oh my gosh, I was awake at 5 this morning because I have no drapes, no curtains in my the room I'm sleeping in, and so the sun comes up at 5, and suddenly I'm wide awake. I really ought to try and have a latest rock and roll schedule because I've got a gig tomorrow night and I'll be staying up much later. than that. So yeah, let's hope I can adjust my timing.
Oh my gosh, no, I need to get a shade because I hate when the light hits my face. I will put a pillow over my face. It looks like someone smothered me, but it's like, no, I'm still alive. I don't like sunlight. I'm such a vampire.
I enjoy waking with the dawn when there isn't a gig to do that night,
Mhm.
but otherwise it's just too long a day.
The reason why I was asking because, you keep making music on a daily. I guess this is more like an ethical, moral question. There is this producer who worked really closely with Michael Hutchence of NXX, and apparently found an unfinished song that Michael was creating. And so this producer decided to work on it and even release it. So you have all these songs in the vault. Would you ever want these songs to be heard out in public, or you want them to remain private?
It varies, I think. I mean, sometimes I make things with no particular intention of it being heard because it's a private investigation of an idea. And if I think the idea um, comes some kind of fruition in my own head, then that's the point I decide there, this is something I want to play to people or turn into a record or whatever. Yeah. So just because I've recorded something for sure doesn't necessarily mean that I want it to be released. Whereas this album of outtakes that you keep promising us, but I never promised anyone that. It's just it's part of the process of being a musician is you do lots of things just for doing them, to
Mhm.
see what happens.
I mean, you've always been an ally for advanced technology. How are you feeling about AI's involvement into music nowadays?
Well, I mean, I think it has some exciting and interesting aspects, but my fear is that it actually just closes the door on experimentalism because, I mean, AI is a kind of plagiarism machine. In as much as it looks around to the thousands of other things that are similar and says, okay, let's construct something that's using bits and pieces of all those thousands of ideas. And what that will do is just narrow down music until it's all sounding the same. And it'll be totally convincing, I think. The problem isn't in its authenticity, it's just that it will lack the drive of experimentalism and the human mistakes that make things interesting. I'm not rushing. I mean, the day I got my hands on AI software, I said, okay, write me a Thompson Twins song. And I was staggered how good it was. I mean, lyrically, it absolutely nailed it, except that it didn't have that grain of sand in the oyster. It was just too kind of evenly good. There was no trouble in there. In other words, there was no kind of inherent kind of self-doubt, which is an important part of human nature. So yeah, in the end, I just did it as an experiment to see what we would come up with, but it wasn't totally satisfactory.
So, because you went to school for music, and now you don't have to go to college to learn music theory and composition. Like, you could learn it from your home because the home has become a studio and there's a lot of bedroom producers. Do you think if you had those advanced tools back in the 80s, like that would have benefited you, or you just like the old school style where you had more hands-on experience?
In a way, technology is appropriate to its time and cultural context. I loved the way we made those records back in the day, but it was a slow and painstaking process. I also completely adore the fact that I've got an entire music studio, recording studio in a laptop. And so wherever I'm going in the world, in the back of a bus or a hotel room, if I have an idea, I can make a record. And that to me is important because it used to be that you said, okay, you tour and then you go back to writing and then you're in a studio for 3 months and then the year was taken up in these kind of segments of varied activity. My last solo album, Science Fiction, was partly written in the back of a bus, because I was on tour at the time. Kind of weird, but totally doable and fun. And why not?
I wonder if that's become more of a rushed way because, there's another band, the 1975, they wrote an entire album while they were on tour on the bus, so I just feel like once they get off stage, they're in tour, and then now they're quickly in writing mode.
You can, I guess, fall into the trap of a decreasing circle of references, because you end up writing about writing songs. And you need to step outside of that bubble. But I think creative people will do that anyway. I mean, if they're smart and creative, they will look outside the immediately obvious for inspiration. And I think they have done in that case. So, yeah. I mean, in the end, there are no rules, and all anyway, rules are made to be broken. But I think it's good that not everyone is doing it the same way. How about that?
History lesson, folks. Back in 1985, you and Madonna played to a crowd of over 100,000 people for Live Aid in Philadelphia. Madonna's kind of been in the news lately. She's has 2 lawsuits, one for being 3 hours late to her own concert. Another one is someone was suing her about her show being overly sexual. As you as an artist and performer, where do you feel like you have an obligation for your fans, or do you draw the line to where you want to express your creativity and your own vision?
I know that you have to consider an audience, but also be true to your own creative processes. So the trick is to overlap those two things somehow, so that they serve each other rather than saying it's one or the other. In a pop group, you're necessarily lucky in that respect because it is about doing things that people like. But at the same time, you're subverting their expectation and coming up with something that they never imagined would arrive. So I think a good combination of those two things. As for Madonna, I don't know what she's up to these days, but she was 3 hours late.
Yes, I think in New York.
It happens. I've never been 3 hours late myself, but a lot of bands have.
So I work at a news station. If you could come up with a headline, what would it be? And it could be anything.
1 minute to midnight.
It's like, is it a big surprise or is it ominous?
Well, that's ominous because the world is in trouble. We have very little time to sort it out. So let's get it right before it does.
So in San Francisco, we are testing, or actually it's out public for use, self-driving cars. Would you ever consider being in one?
Yes, I've been in one already, I think, in kind of limited situations in Australia and also in the airport here in London. You can park your car and then a self-driving car takes you to the terminal.
So what are your thoughts? Because a lot of people are skeptical.
It's already safer than human-driven cars. But it's been great talking to you, and say hi to your mum.
Oh, I will. Okay, so we will see you at the Fox Theater in Oakland on Sunday, June 30th.
I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Thank you for letting millennials speak to you.